Hello, everyone, and welcome to Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans. Today, I want to introduce you to my guest, Whitney Cardosi, a mom of two and the founder of Bloom Kitchen and Retreats. She is a passionate advocate for the connection between nutrition and the mental, physical, and emotional health of today's youth. Her mission is to empower families with the tools and knowledge to nurture confidence, resilience, and well-being in their children. Today's discussion will focus on how her teenage years of not feeling good enough have challenged hers and her own family's view of food and nutrition. We will learn how her journey of making poor choices in what she put in her body, both nutrition and substances, impacted her own emotional and mental health. This really came to light for her as she, like many of us, were forced to be in close proximity of our families and saw how what she was putting into her body impacted her emotional and mental well-being. This has shaped what she shares with moms to simplify health and wellness while equipping kids with practical skills. So without further ado, let's jump right into our conversation. You're listening to Today's Leaders, from Teens to Titans. Hi, I'm Lorraine Connell, a teen leadership coach. I transitioned from teaching chemistry to coaching teens in leadership, helping them realize they can do hard things. We've often believed that leadership is an innate trait, but it's actually a skill that you build and improve. On this show, you'll meet today's leaders who share their teenage experiences, revealing how they developed confidence, direction, and the tools to become the leaders they are now. You'll discover how you or the teens in your life have the potential to become confident leaders, even if it doesn't seem possible. Welcome, Whitney. I am so glad to have you on this podcast today.
Thank you so much. I feel like it's long overdue.
Yeah. So you and I kind of work in the same general group of kids, but I would love for you to take a trip down memory lane and go back to who Whitney was as a teenager and share some of the experiences you had as a teenager, how those experiences impacted you, and the work that you've chosen to do today.
Yeah, I will. I'll do my best to keep it to the point. So, when you say teenage years and just like going back immediately for me, I go right to that bridge, that leap from kind of tween to teen, which is probably why I'm working with that age group right now. But like many of kids, I was born in the early 80s, I'm 43. But like many kids from our generation and even today's generation, I was the product of divorce. My parents divorced at what I feel was a very, transformative age. So I was in middle school. I don't remember exactly, but I was probably in that 11 to 12-year-old range. It kind of extended over the course of a couple of years of like separation and divorce. And I guess unique aspect was we lived in Southern California. My family was originally from Utah. So when my parents divorced, within the year, my dad moved back to Utah, so 2 states away, hundreds and hundreds of miles away. And my brother graduated high school and also went to college in Utah. So we went from a family of 4 to just my mom and I in our house as I was entering high school. So not that they intended to choose that time. They did their best. Fortunately, on a positive note, it was a very amicable divorce. My parents to this day are still very friendly. We still do a lot of things together. And I think in many ways that was great. In other ways, it made things very confusing for me. And we were the type of family, like you have your families that are very outward with their conflict, and we were very quiet about it. So my parents never fought in front of me. I had no idea that there was ever even one single problem in their relationship. My brother, being 4 years older, did. And, it was like many marriages. They just fell out of love. They just weren't making each other happy anymore. It wasn't like a volatile situation. And so that was just very confusing for me. And again, like I said, at a very influential age. And so as I entered high school, having an older brother, I knew older kids and immediately like fell into the party crowd. But I was still on the outside a leader. In middle school, I was on ASB, which was like our student council. I was on the dance prom court, whatever you call it, in middle school. I was well liked. My mom was the assistant principal at my middle school. So like on the surface, I was, your perfect kid, well behaved, did great in school, went into high school. I was in honors classes. I was the first ever freshman to be on the yearbook staff. I was the captain of my field hockey team. I played 3 sports, so year-round athletics. I had great friends. And that I would say defined my life from age 14 until probably 5 years ago, which was on the surface, I am an accomplished person. I'm a leader. I always rise to the challenge. I'm always a high achiever. But behind the scenes, I not living 2 lives, but like didn't know my own worth, struggled with making good choices around alcohol and younger years around recreational drugs, but all the while still being successful. And so I think my point is just that in reference to what you do and the concept of leadership is that there are a lot of different types of leaders. And just because they appear to be a leader and or successful on the outside or in certain aspects of their life, they may not be in other areas. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. In some ways, it's a good thing, right? You can be a leader in one area of your life and not have to be a leader in every area of your life. And so then to bring that to present day, like you said, I have 2 kids. So I have a 9, almost 10-year-old daughter. She'll be 10 in 3 months, and a 6-year-old. So they're in 1st and 4th grade. Like I said, I grew up in Southern California, but relocated out to the Boston area where my husband is from a little over 10 years ago, and had my own challenges of that as well, just adjusting to moving across the country and whatnot, and worked in a corporate world when we moved here up until, 6 years ago when I had my second daughter. And leaving corporate coincided somewhat closely with the pandemic. So about 18 months into leaving my corporate world and my second born being a year and a half, we were thrown into the pandemic. And so not only was I already in the midst of adjusting to corporate life into self-employment, which if you've done that, you know how challenging it is, or even just corporate to being a stay-at-home mom. You lose that sense of self. You don't have the regimen that you're used to, and you're with this little person all the time. I didn't have that with my oldest. I worked full-time and she was in daycare. So we had that structure. So just as I was getting my footing, we went into the pandemic. And so now all of a sudden, the light at the end of the tunnel for me of like, she's almost at the age to go to preschool or, a daycare type situation, that was taken away. And then my 5-year-old and my husband all came home. Mm-hmm. And not to mention, I'm speaking to the choir because anybody listening that's experienced this all the same, right? We were all stuck at home, which is, I think the one silver lining is that we all experienced the same thing so everyone can relate. I was just getting my footing in sort of my new life. And then that happened. And then to add to that, just all the other stressors that came with the pandemic, of course, your family being home, but then not being able to see other friends and family. My business, which I was at the time full-time doing my direct sales job with Arvon, that changed. My ability to go out and do, in-person events and all of those things changed. And so it was tough, right? It was really hard. And as we were coming out of the pandemic, I'll try to wrap this up quickly. I was actually at one of my healthiest points in life physically. So I did something called the 75 hard that you might be familiar with, but it's basically a 75-day sort of fitness nutrition regimen. Cut out alcohol, clean eating, exercising twice a day, reading books. It's actually a pretty interesting program. I was finishing that up in the spring of 2021. And literally within a week or 2 of finishing that, I got COVID actually for the first time, but it ended up landing me in the hospital with pneumonia for a week. And it was pretty bad. And so, of course, to cure myself from that, I had steroids and all of those things. Coming out of that, then it threw me into a depression. And I believe that to be related to the imbalance of my gut microbiome and all of those things, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Then I got through that. And the way I got myself out of it was that depression brought me into drinking a lot of red wine in the fall and the winter, which led to giving me anxiety, which now I know I can't drink red wine, at least not at the level I was. And the way that I got myself out of that depression was through nutrition. So I know that's a long story, but really what it brought me to understanding was gave me so much reflection on my teen and 20s years of understanding that, of course, I felt the way that I felt about myself, about my job, about actually my boyfriend, who is now my husband. We broke up for a period of time because I was at a very low point personally in my life. And it gave me so much reflection and understanding how alcohol and drugs played a part in my self-worth and my ability to have confidence and find joy without drugs and alcohol. And then fast forward, 15, 20 years later, using nutrition to get myself out of that depression and then reflecting on the amount of like rage that I experienced during the pandemic, being home with my family and just anxiety and all of these things that I would have never described myself as someone who had anxiety, but it just all came to fruition. And then now fast forward 2 or 3 years later, as my daughter's entering her tween years, I'm like, oh, okay. So now I'm seeing her have these roller coasters of emotions because that's normal at that age, of course, through their hormonal changes, their brain development, their emotional changes. And at the same time, I know how to support that through nutrition now. And I also know how to support that through some of the other self work that I've done, how we talk about to ourselves, the thoughts that we have, and all of those things. And I just said, dang, I need to like share this with as many moms and tweens as I can, because I want them to know that while it is normal, I literally just had this conversation with my daughter 2 days ago. While it is normal to feel exceptionally emotional at this age or be confused by certain situations or emotions, you also can support yourself and make it less hard. Their menstrual cycle is a perfect example, and then I'll be done. I'm in a tween group on Facebook, and a mom recently shared this like little gift package that she put together for her daughter who just started her period, which was really thoughtful. In it was like chocolate and all of these things that we associate with our menstrual cycle, right? Like we have cravings and we have cramps. What most moms don't know, while every person is of course different, that it actually doesn't have to be that way. You can have more mild symptoms related to your emotions, your physical pain from your menstrual cycle, your cravings, and all of that if you are eating healthy. And that's just one example, but that's to just display my point of that these things that our tween daughters, especially, but of course, all tweens going through puberty, boys and girls, those things that they experience, they can actually support themselves and make it a little bit easier for themselves through nutrition. And then also, of course, some of the other work that we do around mindset work and all of those things. So that's it. That hopefully you followed me on that journey of where I was and where I am now. I know that was really long, but hopefully it makes sense.
It's really fascinating to me to be able to have these conversations with people who are out here doing incredible work now, and to know that it all really stems from something and things that happened throughout our lives that gave us the drive, the passion, the ambition to make it better for others. And I was just having a conversation with somebody who works with really high achieving teens. And she was a super high achieving teen when she was young. And so she says, you can't really fix your children until you fix yourself. And it is absolutely the truth for me. And it sounds like is the truth for you, right? You're seeing your children walk the path or going towards the path that you took. And you know, as an adult, that was not a great path. I don't want them to do the same thing. You've got two choices. You can prevent them from doing it, or you can show them that there are other options. And I think like you and me and the guests that I had, we have that opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's such an important point. And I think as parents, our natural instinct is, and I'm not a parenting expert, but I think our natural instinct is, let's just take drugs and alcohol as the first example. Our goal is to prevent them from doing that, right? Like, don't drink, don't do drugs for obvious reasons. But I knew all of those things too. And I was a smart kid, right? I think for me, what as a parent myself and my goal, but also I think this would be helpful for others, parents, is yes, explain the harm and the dangers of those things and how they affect us, but also more importantly, equip them with the knowledge and tools so that if they find themselves in a situation where they're presented with that and or even partake, they know how to get like through that, if that makes sense. And so it was like, for me, I think if I had understood the connection between, I wrote a blog post about this, I think, or it was a Facebook post, but if I understood the connection between the food that I was eating and really ultimately what it is, the gut brain connection, right? So the connection, the vagus nerve, that basically they talk to each other. And essentially, the majority of our serotonin or our happy hormones live in our gut, right? And so when you are supporting your gut through nutritional food, and I won't get into the details of like what that is because it is a little bit different for everybody, but we actually can pull the levers on the amount of joy that we feel. And so I think if I had understood that at some point, maybe not as a teenager, because, you know, teenagers are maybe not quite ready to understand those things. But I think if at some point I had understood that like the drinking was ultimately, and drugs like ultimately was what was making me sad. And also like the addiction essentially to it. It's hard for me to say that, but that I wasn't an addict and I wasn't incapable. Literally those things were screwing with my brain. And so I didn't have control over that. And I guess if you understand addiction, you know that. But I think if kids understood that, like, the more you do that, the harder it's going to get, right? And the drinking actually physiologically is making you sad, right? And so even though we are taught, or we as humans, I think that a circumstance is what makes us unhappy, it's really not, right? And so where, let's say a kid, we were talking about popularity earlier. So where a kid might think, well, I don't have any friends and therefore, you know, I'm not liked. And therefore that is what makes me sad. Let's say we're a teenager or someone in our 20s though. And then you layer in eating super unhealthy and or alcohol and drugs. That's going to exacerbate it because actually your brain is incapable of finding that joy. And so I just think if more kids understood that, like, they might not feel so tired or they might not want to physically harm their sibling, right? Like I think about the fighting that my daughters do. They might be able to control that a little bit more when they're supporting themselves through nutrition. And that probably more when they get older and they're making those choices on their own through like those teen and older years. But I think that's my point, is just if we understood that connection more, it would really empower and enable us to understand that we have more control over our feeling happy than we think we do.
Wow. Yeah. I think that is the piece that is really fascinating to me, is that we do have the power to impact the joy and impact the happiness that we think we can't control, right? We think it's the circumstances. We think it's the situations that we're in. We think it's how many friends we have. And I've been thinking a lot about what you were alluding to, is that I wish maybe I had known the connection at a younger age. But what you're doing is you're empowering moms to know this information to help guide their kids as they grow up, right? So your goal is really to provide nutritional information and guidance for a mom who's at home cooking or packing their lunch for the kids, to be able to see some of these changes in their own children.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, for me, I try to keep it simple, right? Like, let's take the mom that's trying to hit a certain goal weight or hit macro rates, like take that out of the scenario. We're really just looking at like eating healthy and like supporting our kids' health, right? My theory is if you're eating real whole food, no matter what combination of it, like you're supporting your child's health, right? Whether they're eating a bunch of potatoes or a bunch of broccoli, at the end of the day, that's all better than something that comes in a package or a bag. And I'm not here to go down the rabbit hole of the, you know, processed food and food industry, but just to touch on what you shared and like just keeping it simple. And hopefully also through learning, and this is why when I decided to do my retreat, I decided that I want it to be moms and daughters together, because I think as moms, when we're sitting there absorbing information on how we want to, we will spend so much more time and effort in making our kids' lives better than we will our own. Yeah. But hopefully they'll absorb that information and understand, for them, they're not doing themselves any favor as a mom by not eating all day, right? So of course, when you pick up your child from school, and you're a tween and they come home and they're rolling their eyes and slamming doors and you can't control your reaction to that, but you didn't eat today, it makes a little bit more sense, right? It's not going to fix it completely, but you'll have more ability to be calm. And, that term hangry exists for a reason. It's an actual physiological thing, right? Like you can't control your emotions if you don't have the proper nutrition in your system to do that. And again, I'm not talking about a certain number of calories or carbs, but just real food that your body can actually eat. All right. And that your body can feed off of so that you can have that support. And that's my goal. Yeah. And then that's where my cooking classes come in, right? Like there's so much research on their kids' willingness to try new foods and to also grow up as an adult and cook if they're experiencing those scenarios as a child, whether it's in their own home or in like a class such as mine. And I think we live in a day and age where we're extremely busy. Our kids are over scheduled and we say we don't have time to cook. Well, that is true because of the choices that we're making, right? And the lifestyle that we're living, and we're busy and we're in a million activities. And so if we can slow down a little bit, and I always say, like, when people say, how do I get my kids to eat healthier and this and that? I always say, the first and foremost, are you setting that example for them, right? And many cases and many times we are. And I'm not saying that's going to fix everything, but if you aren't cooking food yourself at home, and I don't mean every single night, I just mean at least once a while, they see you preparing food from scratch in your kitchen, transforming a piece of, food into a meal. If you're not setting that example, then most likely your child isn't going to grow up wanting to cook either. And there is so much research that shows the correlation between cooking at home and health. And again, it doesn't have anything to do with what kind of food you're preparing. As long as you're actually cooking your own food at home, there's and this is when you will start looking at other countries. We're the only country that eats out at the level that with, the frequency we do. We're the only country that orders delivery meals. And I'm not saying all of those aren't okay. And we do get to experience those conveniences, but taking the time to prepare a meal and enjoy it as a family at least once a week or a few times a month is huge. And for some other people, that's obviously going to be a lot more frequent, but it's important. So just kind of touching on, how I support families and through nutrition and through my cooking classes and the retreat and stuff. And yes, that's ultimately the goal. And then hopefully the parents are absorbing some of that information as well for themselves.
I like how you start with, are you setting that example? Because I know that, it's that oxygen mask, right? We're not going to be able to help anybody if we're not able to breathe ourselves. And I think what you are providing is an opportunity to create a partnership with your cooking classes, right? The kids are learning how to cook and then they go home and they want to bring that into the house. And so the mom or whoever's the predominant cooker doesn't feel like everything falls on them. And when things don't go the way they're supposed to go, it's all my fault, right? So the kids are invested and they feel like they're in partnership, which is why I love your Bloom retreat is both mom and daughters are getting this information and they're going to absorb it in a different way. They're going to bring it home differently, and they're going to be able to connect and build on what they learned as they move forward, right? So maybe I'm making a bad choice as mom, and my daughter's going to be like, hey, mom, do you remember when we learned about this? And it's like, it's so cool to think about that kind of leadership that's being created at the Bloom retreat.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. And I think in many ways, like the moms think they're doing this for their daughters, but like really they're going to get so much out of it. And like little things like having them committing to like putting their phone away during that. I know in our house, like my oldest doesn't have a phone and we don't have plans of giving her one anytime soon, or at least a smartphone. And yeah, Jason's my husband, I'll say to the girls like, okay, you have to get off your tablet or get off your screen time. And then we'll sit there and be on our phones for another hour. And I try my best and I've empowered them. Like we talk about that a lot, right? So I just traveled with my daughter to Florida. And when we were in the airport and even with some of her teammates, there were so many times where we would look around and we would notice that everyone was on their phone, whether it was adults or girls that are slightly older than her that have phones. And so we would talk about that, not in like a talking smack kind of way, but like observation.
Yes.
And we have deemed certain parts of our home and certain times, so dinner time, of course, being one of them, when the nights where we do sit down together, which isn't every night, but we try to do as much as possible, our movie time. A lot of nights during the week, we'll spend at least, 20 minutes to 30 minutes together. Anyways, those are two times where it's a no phone zone, right? Am I perfect? No. But I have empowered my girls that if they see me on my phone to call me out on it. I know that the most important thing that I do in that moment is not make an excuse about why I'm on my phone.
Mm.
Because guess what? In 5 years, when she does have a smartphone and I ask her to get off, she'll have an excuse. I'm doing my homework or whatever it may be. And I am not perfect, but I think it's just those are the types of conversations that I want to have in like this retreat of like, we can spend so much time reading books about the anxious generation and all these things about our kids, right? But if we aren't even living it ourselves, and I think that's really what terrifies me personally for my own children with the phone is I know my addiction to my phone. I know it. I will own it. And I have a fully developed brain. And I didn't get a flip phone until I was 18. And I didn't get a smartphone until, I don't know, what, 15 years ago, if that. I can't even imagine the addiction that this will create in my 9-year-old's brain if I give this phone to her. And I was going to touch on that earlier when we were talking about when I was sharing my story. And, you know, for me, kind of where I led it was the impact of my parents' divorce at the age that I was, and then starting, you know, with the drinking at 14 and then recreational drugs in college. We have super boosted exponentially all of that with phones, technology, and social media, because now we've given kids a new way to be addicted to something that has nothing to do with drinking or drugs. And it's the being put in your face of the social right aspects. Like I didn't have to know that my friends were together on the weekend until I went to school, and it still sucked to find out, but it wasn't like real time. Right. And so it's just so scary. And I don't mean to paint a negative picture. Life is beautiful and we're so lucky to have what we have right now. I just think I feel so passionate about everywhere we turn, there's challenges, right?
Mm-hmm.
And is it realistic that's all going to go away? No. So then we have to equip ourselves and our kids with the tools to be able to maneuver through those mines, those landmines of everything that they're going to experience in life. And my goal is not to have my kids never experience those things. You know, that's what makes us human. And so I do want them to experience failure and I do want them to experience challenges, but I hope that they have more tools than I had to be able to maneuver those and still live a beautiful life and whatever success is defined by them, right? Which we talked about. So,
Well, and I want to kind of harken back a little bit to your comment about the challenge, you know, when the divorce happened. Like, did you feel like there was a disconnect between you and your mom in that relationship? I know as teenagers, our girls will break away from us around their teenage years and they'll do things that really hurt us as parents. But do you think you're creating with Bloom a recreation of something that you might have wanted when you were that age?
yeah, you know, that's a really interesting question. So to answer the initial question, yeah, my mom went into a depression. So she basically still high functioning. She was the assistant principal at my middle school. So she'd show up, but when she came home, she would basically go to bed. I don't really remember that super vividly, but my mom and I have always had a very open relationship. We've always talked about everything. She was my best friend and my worst enemy. You know what I mean? Like I could tell her anything and I always knew that she would be there for me, but she was my punching bag, which that's normal for a lot of moms, right? And she was just doing the best that she could. I read it in a Brené Brown book. It's the best thing I've ever read in my life, which is people are just doing the best that they can with the tools that they have. And so I think about that every time, right? Like when I am faced with someone I might deem incompetent giving me my coffee at Starbucks, it's like, you know what? They're doing the best that they can with the way that they were raised, with the education that they've received. And, you know, their parents probably haven't instilled in them work ethic, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, so she was doing the best that she could, but I definitely took advantage of that too, of her basically not really being there physically and I mean, she was there physically, but not so much emotionally. And then when she kind of come out of that, by that point, I was like, I'm out. Like I've been doing my own thing. And then your question about, I think so. I think that is it, right? Like I wish that my mom had more tools to understand what she was going through emotionally. I remember her telling me depression ran in our family, which is a fact, I guess, in the sense that my mom, my grandmother, and I believe her mom, my great grandmother, who I knew she was alive until I was in my late teens, which was great. But I think at one point they all were prescribed medication for depression. So a doctor deemed them to have depression and prescribed them. And I'm not anti-meds. I'm just being clear about that. I think if my mom had understood how nutrition played a role in her life, that she would have been able to support herself better through that. Not to say that she shouldn't have taken depression medication.
Right.
And then I also think if she had understood some of those things, I think she could have supported me. I don't know for sure because I think she was just trying to survive herself. But I think that that's my goal, right? It's like at the same time, I want to give these tools to the girls, the kids, but also to moms so that they together that they can be more successful or to be successful or and you know what? Also, there's a lot of moms probably that just want to come spend a day with their daughter. And that's totally fine. Like, we're not going to
Right.
have, it's not going to be, but yes, I think you hit it for sure. And I hadn't really thought about that, to be honest with you. But I think, it's funny being at my age now. And when I start to talk to my mom about the things that I know, like she's totally got into like this concept around gut health now. And she was talking about her boyfriend, and they used to go to Mexico in the winters. And she would always say by the end of the trip, he was always so like blah and didn't want to do anything. And I'm like, well, mom, were you guys having a couple beers every single day? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, well, that's
Mhm.
probably part of it, right? It's not like they were like, binge drinking all day, every day, but I'm like, but that has an effect. And then when you're not in Mexico, you guys aren't doing that. And so it's fun to be the teacher now and like teach her those things and talk about those things. And I think you definitely hit a point with that. She was a great mom, don't get me wrong, but if she had some other tools to maneuver through that, then maybe we would have both been a little less, more unscathed through those
Well,
years.
and I think it gives these moms and daughters an opportunity to build a connection under pretenses of maybe we're learning something, or maybe we're just building a relationship and strengthening a relationship.
Yep.
And I think that there's never anything that doesn't have additional value when you
Yeah.
do things like that. I also wanted to reflect a little bit on your outward appearance and your inward feelings as a teen, and how often, especially women, as I'm reflecting on this myself, is we present perfection and we present what we think is complete on the outside, while the inside, not for everyone, but for lots of us, is broken. And it sounds like you experience the same thing. And I wonder what you think the work that you're doing now might help prevent young girls from feeling those ways, or like even just showing up as who they really are in situations. Like, did you
Yeah.
see a component of that?
Yeah. I mean, for me, this is one reason I love social media because I love to be able to show, like, be relatable and like show real
Mhm.
life. So I'm a little bit into like personality traits and like Enneagrams and things like that. And so whether it's the cart before the horse or vice versa, like my Enneagram is, I think it's a 3, which for one thing, our worth is determined through our work. So that's one thing that makes so much sense to me when I look at, to me, success was I was the yearbook editor, I was the field hockey captain because that was my work, right? As a teenager, it was how I showed up at school and
Mhm.
in activities and things like that. And then that manifested through obviously my career and even my business. And also, I can adapt my personality and who I am depending on who I'm with. And in
Mhm.
some ways, that's really great. We can be kind of a chameleon, right? And it's not in the sense of I don't know who I am. It's in our desire to make other people feel comfortable, but also like just be adaptable. And I actually love that about myself. Like I really can be very like adapt to the people that I'm around, but that can be a danger if you aren't sure and true of who you are yourself, right? And I have found as I got older, number one, there's actually a really interesting podcast on how the brain changes as you go into perimenopause and menopause, and how actually our care for what other people think changes and lessens as we get older, which makes sense, right? Some of it
Mhm.
life experience, but some of it actually physiologically that changes for us. But as I got older, my desire to be understood became more important to me. And in order to really be understood to who I was, meant sharing the less perfect parts of my life,
Mm.
which meant showing a messy home and then also starting to become open more about my journey with like drinking and alcohol. The fact that I got arrested with a DUI like literally 5 days before I moved here. I mean, I was a grown woman at that point. I was engaged to be married. Like within a few years, I was going to own a home and have kids. And so it was important to me to share those things because I wanted people to know that even though I looked perfect on the outside, and people would say that to me, and sometimes they still do, they'll say things like, I don't know how you do it all. And I appreciate it, but I also kind of hate it because I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't want you to think that I don't want, by you seeing me and thinking that I'm perfect, I don't want that to then create some insecurity in yourself or thought that you also need to be perfect to be happy. And so it's important for me to share the less perfect parts of my life. And yes, because also that is an epidemic among women, right? And so even when my 9-year-old is fretting about how she looks when she leaves the house, part of me is like, hates that because I don't want her. And I'll say that to her. I'll say, you know, that no matter what you look like, it doesn't determine your worth. And she doesn't know what I'm talking about, but I say it anyways, because one day she'll remember. Or I'll remind her that most likely no one's paying attention to what she's wearing because they're too busy thinking about what they're wearing and those things. But yeah, it's an important thing I think for kids is, on the one hand, yes, it's important to present yourself, right, in a presentable way, depending on the circumstance when you have a job and at school, right? But at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be perfect. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yes, it's something that I can very much relate to. And it's important to me. It's kind of a little mission of mine to always like remind people that they don't have to be perfect, and having the perfect hair, the perfect house, like that doesn't equal joy, really. I mean, it can bring you some happiness for sure, but it's not the end all be all.
So, what advice would you give to a teenager or teenage Whitney if you could go back and give some advice?
I think it's like learn from your mistakes, I think, or be reflective of situations and know that you have the power to feel joy. You have the power to create a happy life for yourself. It's not determined on your friends or the clothes that you have or the technology that you own, but through enriching your body and your life through nutrition and understanding how life works, like you really can have a direct impact on the amount of joy that you feel. And no one else has control over that, I think, is what's really important for me to teach my own kids and hopefully other people as well. And it really just comes down to like learning and being open to understanding how our body works, how it connects to our brain, therefore then connects to our emotion and all of those things. And it's not, the end result isn't to be happy all the time and never feel an emotion, right? I just had that conversation with my daughter the other night. Like, we are complex humans. We have hundreds of different emotions, and that's what's so beautiful about it. But if you feel like you're feeling one more than the other, and that's not what you want, that you have more control over changing that than you think that you do. If you just kind of turn inward and look at the actions, the habits, the things that you're doing and the food that you're eating and all of those things, you have the power to change that and kind of lead the life that you want to lead.
Whitney, tell us how we can find you and share a little bit about your freebie.
So if you're local to the area, I'm in the North Shore, Boston area. If you're local to the area, I offer kids cooking classes, both publicly and I partner with schools. But you can get all the information for that and my retreat on my Bloom Instagram account, which is at Bloom North Shore. If you're more interested in learning about like my life and like where I talk more about my journey and all of that, I do that more on my personal page, which is at Whitney_Cardosi. I also have a cookbook available on Amazon. It's called In the Kitchen, Healthy Meals You'll Actually Enjoy. And it's just a huge variety of breakfast recipes, dinner recipes, holidays. I have a whole section on like fun ways to use protein powder. And again, my diet style, if you will, is just using real ingredients. It's pretty simple. And then, yes, I have a freebie available right now. So they are conversation cards for moms and tweens. There are 4 different topics. So when your child's feeling anxious, when they are feeling sad, tired, or we have 8 different questions for each of those topics that you and your daughter can kind of use together. I think sometimes, I use the example of your daughter comes home, she slams the door, she's rolling her eyes, she's giving you all the attitude after school, and you know something's going on, but you don't know what, and you don't know how to bring it up or how to talk about it. So it's not necessarily giving you, here's the tools of how to fix this. It's just, here's some questions that you can ask where you guys can maybe start a dialogue and start having conversations and just see where it leads you. And if nothing else, it's going to just deepen your relationship. So those are available now. They're linked in my Instagram accounts, or you can go to whitneycardosi.com/conversation cards. And I will obviously send you all that information for the notes of this show. And you can print them, just have them on your phone, or you can actually print them and cut them up into like a deck of cards. So I'm excited about that as well. And again, if you're local, the Bloom Retreat, which is for girls ages 9 to 12 and their moms, will be February 9th at the Bear Hill Golf Club, which is in Stoneham, Massachusetts.
Thank you so much for being part of this today.
Thank you so much. I was really looking forward to it. And likewise, I'm just so grateful and excited for everything that you're doing as well. I'm so grateful that you're a sponsor at the retreat. And I love that I can work with these tweens and then pass them right on up to you.
Awesome. Are you ready to help the young people in your life unlock their inner strength and step confidently into leadership? The new workbook from Peers Not Fears, Your Voice Matters, Uncovering Your Unique Leadership. It's designed to help teens see the leader in themselves, step by step. It's not just a workbook. It's the first step towards a ripple effect that could change lives. Let's turn today's teens into tomorrow's titans. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other parents who might benefit from this conversation. Together, we can support our teens in building healthy, positive relationships and become leaders of tomorrow. Until next time, I'm Lorraine Connell, and this is Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans.